New Mexico is a state in the southwestern region of the United States. It is one of the mountain states of the southern Rocky Mountains, sharing the Four Corners region with Utah, Colorado, and Arizona. It also borders the state of Texas to the east and southeast, Oklahoma to the northeast, and shares an international border with the Mexican states of Chihuahua and Sonora to the south. New Mexico's largest city is Albuquerque, and its state capital is Santa Fe, the oldest state capital in the U.S., founded in 1610 as the government seat of Nuevo Mexico in New Spain, as well as the highest at 6,998 feet, 2,133 meters. New Mexico is the fifth largest of the 50 states by area, but with just over 2.1 million residents, ranks 36th in population and 45th in population density. 9. Its climate and geography are highly varied, ranging from forested mountains to sparse deserts. The northern and eastern regions exhibit a colder alpine climate, while the west and south are warmer and more arid. The Rio Grande and its fertile valley runs from north to south, creating a riparian biome through the center of the state that supports a bosque habitat and distinct Albuquerque Basin climate. 1/3 of New Mexico's land is federally owned, and the state hosts many protected wilderness areas and 15 national parks and monuments, including 3 UNESCO World Heritage Sites, the most of any U.S. state. 10. New Mexico's economy is highly diversified, including cattle ranching, agriculture, lumber, scientific and technological research, tourism, and the arts. Major sectors include mining, oil and gas, aerospace, media, and film. 11, 12, 13, 14. Its total real gross domestic product GDP in 2023 was over $105 billion, with a GDP per capita of $49,879. 15. State tax policy is characterized by low to moderate taxation of resident personal income by national standards, with tax credits, exemptions, and special considerations for military personnel and favorable industries. New Mexico has a significant U.S. military presence, 16 including White Sands Missile Range, KUMMSC, and strategically valuable federal research centers, such as the Sandia and Los Alamos National Laboratories. The state hosted several key facilities of the Manhattan Project, which developed the world's first atomic bomb, and was the site of the first nuclear test, Trinity. In prehistoric times, New Mexico was home to ancestral Puebloans, the Mogollon culture, and ancestral Ute. 17 Navajos and Apaches arrived in the late 15th century, and the Comanches in the early 18th century. Why? The Pueblo peoples occupied several dozen villages, primarily in the Rio Grande Valley of northern New Mexico. 1819 Spanish explorers and settlers arrived in the 16th century from present-day Mexico. 2021. 22 Isolated by its rugged terrain. New Mexico was a peripheral part of the viceroyalty of New Spain dominated by Comancheria. Following Mexican independence in 1821, it became an autonomous region and state on January 6, 1912. New Mexico's history contributed to its unique culture. It is one of only 7 majority-minority states, with the nation's highest percentage of Hispanic and Latino Americans and second highest percentage of Native Americans after Alaska. 23. The state is home to 1/3 of the Navajo Nation, 19 federally recognized Pueblo communities, and 3 federally recognized Apache tribes. Its large Latino population includes Hispanos descended from settlers during the Spanish era, 20 for 25, and later groups of Mexican Americans since the 19th century. The New Mexican flag, which is among the most recognizable in the U.S., 26 reflects the state's eclectic origins, featuring the ancient sun symbol of the Zia, a Puebloan tribe, with the scarlet and gold coloration of the Spanish flag. 27. The confluence of indigenous, Hispanic, Spanish, and Mexican, and American influences is also evident in New Mexico's unique cuisine, Spanish dialect, folk music, and Pueblo revival, and territorial styles of architecture. New Mexico received its name long before the present-day country of Mexico won independence from Spain and adopted that name in 1821. The name Mexico derives from Nahuatl and originally referred to the heartland of the Mexica, the rulers of the Aztec Empire, in the Valley of Mexico, 2829. Following their conquest of the Aztecs in the early 16th century, the Spanish began exploring what is now the southwestern United States, calling it Nuevo Mexico. In 1581, the Chamuscado and Rodriguez expedition named the region north of the Rio Grande San Felipe del Nuevo Mexico. 30. The Spaniards had hoped to find wealthy indigenous cultures similar to the Mexica. The indigenous cultures of New Mexico, however, proved to be unrelated to the Mexica and lacking in riches, but the name persisted. 31. 32. Before statehood in 1912, the name New Mexico loosely applied to various configurations of territories in the same general area, which evolved throughout the Spanish, Mexican, and U.S. periods, but typically encompass most of present-day New Mexico along with sections of neighboring states. 33. The history of New Mexico is based on archaeological evidence, attesting to the varying cultures of humans occupying the area of New Mexico since approximately 9200 BCE, and written records. The earliest peoples had migrated from northern areas of North America after leaving Siberia via the Bering Land Bridge. Artifacts and architecture demonstrate ancient complex cultures in this region. The first written records of the region were made by the Spanish conquistadors, who encountered Native American pueblos when they explored the area in the 16th century. Since that time, the Spanish Empire, Mexico, and the United States since 1787 have claimed control of the area. The area was governed as New Mexico Territory until 1912, when it was admitted as a state. The relatively isolated state had an economy dependent on mining. New Mexico introduced the atomic age in 1945, as the first nuclear weapons were developed by the federal government in the research center it established at Los Alamos. Ethnically, New Mexico's population consists of a mixture of Native Americans, Hispanics, and Anglos. The area currently occupied by the U.S. state of New Mexico has undergone numerous changes in occupancy and territorial claims and designations. This geographic chronology traces the territorial evolution of New Mexico. New Spain era, beyond forging better relations with the Pueblos, governors were forbearing in their approach to the indigenous peoples, such as was with Governor Tomás Vélez Cachupan. 42. The comparatively large reservations in New Mexico and Arizona are partly a legacy of Spanish treaties recognizing indigenous land claims in Nuevo Mexico. 43. Nevertheless, relations between the various indigenous groups and Spanish settlers remain nebulous and complex, varying from trade and commerce to cultural assimilation and intermarriage to total warfare. During most of the 18th century, raids by Navajo, Apache, and especially Comanche inhibited the growth and prosperity of the New Mexico. The region's harsh environment and remoteness, surrounded by hostile Native Americans, fostered a greater degree of self-reliance as well as pragmatic cooperation between the Pueblo peoples and colonists. Many indigenous communities enjoyed a large measure of autonomy well into the late 19th century due to the improved governance. Just beyond the wall was the ejido, communal land for grazing, firewood, or recreation. By 1800, the population of New Mexico had reached 25,000, not including indigenous inhabitants, far exceeding the territories of California and Texas. 44. Mexico era, territory of Santa Fe de Nuevo Mexico when it belonged to Mexico in 1824. As part of New Spain, the province of New Mexico became part of the First Mexican Empire in 1821 following the Mexican War of Independence. 36. 109. Upon its secession from Mexico in 1836, the Republic of Texas claimed the portion east of the Rio Grande, based on the erroneous assumption that the older Hispanic settlements of the upper Rio Grande were the same as the newly established Mexican settlements of Texas. The Texan Santa Fe expedition was launched to seize the contested territory, but failed with the capture and imprisonment of the entire army by the Hispanic New Mexico militia. During the turn of the 19th century, the extreme northeastern part of New Mexico, north of the Canadian River and east of the spine of the Sangre de Cristo Mountains, was still claimed by France, which sold it in 1803 as part of the Louisiana Purchase. In 1812, the U.S. reclassified the land as part of the Missouri Territory. This region of New Mexico, along with territory comprising present-day southeastern Colorado, the Texas and Oklahoma panhandles, and southwestern Kansas, was ceded to Spain under the Adams-Onis Treaty in 1819. When the First Mexican Republic began to transition into the Centralist Republic of Mexico, they began to centralize power, ignoring the sovereignty of Santa Fe and disregarding Pueblo land rights. This led to the Chamayo Rebellion in 1837, led by Genizaro José González, 45. The death of then-Governor Albino Perez during the revolt was met with further hostility. Though José González was executed due to his involvement in the governor's death, subsequent governors Manuel Armijo and Juan Bautista Vigil, while Laird, agreed with some of the underlying sentiment. This led to New Mexico becoming financially and politically tied to the U.S. and preferring trade along the Santa Fe Trail. Territorial phase. Following the victory of the United States in the Mexican-American War 1846-48, Mexico ceded its northern territories to the U.S., including California, Texas, and New Mexico. 36. The Americans were initially heavy-handed in their treatment of former Mexican citizens, triggering the Taos Revolt in 1847 by Hispanos and their Pueblo allies. The insurrection led to the death of Territorial Governor Charles Bent and the collapse of the civilian government established by Stephen W. Kearny. In response, the U.S. government appointed local Donaciano Vigil as governor to better represent New Mexico, 46, and also vowed to accept the land rights of Nuevo Mexicans and grant them citizenship. In 1864, President Abraham Lincoln symbolized the recognition of native land rights with the Lincoln Canes, scepters of office gifted to each of the pueblos, a tradition dating back to Spanish and Mexican eras. 47-48, after the Republic of Texas was admitted as a state in 1846, it attempted to claim the eastern portion of New Mexico east of the Rio Grande, while the California Republic and state of Deseret each claimed parts of western New Mexico. Under the Compromise of 1850, these regions were forced by the U.S. government to drop their claims. Texas received $10 million in federal funds. California was granted statehood and officially establishing the Utah Territory, therein recognizing most of New Mexico's historically established land claims. 36. 135. Pursuant to the Compromise, Congress established the New Mexico Territory in September of that year. 49. It included most of present-day Arizona and New Mexico, along with the Las Vegas Valley and what would later become Clark County in Nevada. In 1853, the U.S. acquired the mostly desert southwestern bootheel of the state, along with Arizona's land south of the Gila River in the Gadsden Purchase, which was needed for the right-of-way to encourage construction of a transcontinental railroad. 36. 136. U.S. Civil War, American Indian Wars, and American Frontier Civil War effects in New Mexico Territory, including Arizona. 1860. Territories divided. 1867. When the U.S. Civil War broke out in 1861, both Confederate and Union governments claimed ownership and territorial rights over New Mexico Territory. The Confederacy claimed the Southern Tract as its own Arizona Territory and as part of the Trans-Mississippi Theater of the War, waged the ambitious New Mexico Campaign to control the American Southwest and open up access to Union California. Confederate power in the New Mexico Territory was effectively broken after the Battle of Glorieta Pass in 1862, though the Confederate territorial government continued to operate out of Texas. More than 8,000 soldiers from New Mexico Territory served in the Union Army. 50, the indigenous people of northern New Mexico, by Baldwin Mulhausen, 1861. The end of the war saw rapid economic development and settlement in New Mexico, which attracted homesteaders, ranchers, cowboys, businessmen, and outlaws. 51. Many of the folklore characters of the Western genre had their origins in New Mexico, most notably businesswoman Maria Gertrudis Barcello, outlaw Billy the Kid, and lawmen Pat Garrett and El Fago Baca. The influx of Anglo-Americans from the eastern U.S., which include African Americans and recent European immigrants, reshaped the state's economy, culture, and politics. Into the late 19th century, the majority of New Mexicans remained ethnic mestizos of mixed Spanish and Native American ancestry, primarily Pueblo, Navajo, Apache, Genazzaro, and Comanche, many of whom had roots going back to Spanish settlement in the 16th century. This distinctly New Mexican ethnic group became known as Hispanos and developed a more pronounced identity vis-a-vis the newer Anglo arrivals. Politically, they still controlled most town and county offices through local elections, and wealthy ranching families commanded considerable influence, preferring business, legislative, and judicial relations with fellow indigenous New Mexican groups. By contrast, Anglo-Americans, who were outnumbered but well-organized and growing 50, tended to have more ties to the territorial government, whose officials were appointed by the U.S. federal government. Subsequently, newer residents of New Mexico generally favored maintaining territorial status, which they saw as a check on Native and Hispano influence. A consequence of the Civil War was intensifying conflict with indigenous peoples, which was part of the broader American Indian Wars along the frontier. The withdrawal of troops and material for the war effort had prompted raids by hostile tribes, and the federal government moved to subdue the many native communities that had been effectively autonomous throughout the colonial period. Following the elimination of the Confederate threat, Brigadier General James Carleton, who had assumed command of the Military Department of New Mexico in 1862, led what he described as a merciless war against all hostile tribes that aimed to force them to their knees, and then confine them to reservations where they could be Christianized and instructed in agriculture. 51. With famed frontiersman Kit Carson placed in charge of troops in the field, powerful indigenous groups, such as the Navajo, Mescalero Apache, Kiowa, and Comanche were brutally pacified through a scorched earth policy, and thereafter forced into barren and remote reservations. Sporadic conflicts continued into the late 1880s, most notably the guerrilla campaigns led by Apache chiefs Victorio and his son-in-law Nana. The political and cultural clashes between these competing ethnic groups sometimes culminated in mob violence, including lynchings of Native, Hispanic, and Mexican peoples, as was attempted at the Frisco Shootout in 1884. Nevertheless, prominent figures from across these communities, and from both the Democratic and Republican parties, attempted to fight this prejudice and forge a more cohesive, multi-ethnic New Mexican identity. They include lawmen Baca and Garrett, and Governors Curry, Hagerman, and Otero. 53-54. Indeed, some territorial governors, like Lew Wallace, had served in both the Mexican and American militaries. 55. U.S. Civil War, American Indian Wars, and American Frontier Civil War effects in New Mexico Territory, including Arizona, 1860 territories divided, 1867. When the U.S. Civil War broke out in 1861, both Confederate and Union governments claimed ownership and territorial rights over New Mexico Territory. The Confederacy claimed the Southern Tract as its own Arizona Territory, and as part of the Trans-Mississippi Theater of the War, waged the ambitious New Mexico Campaign to control the American Southwest and open up access to Union California. Confederate power in the New Mexico Territory was effectively broken after the Battle of Glorieta Pass in 1862. though the Confederate territorial government continued to operate out of Texas. More than 8,000 soldiers from New Mexico Territory served in the Union Army. 50. The Indigenous People of Northern New Mexico by Baldwin Mulhausen, 1861. The end of the war saw rapid economic development and settlement in New Mexico, which attracted homesteaders, ranchers, cowboys, businessmen, and outlaws. 51. Many of the folklore characters of the Western genre had their origins in New Mexico, most notably businesswoman Maria Gertrudis Barcello, outlaw Billy the Kid, and lawmen Pat Garrett and El Fago Baca. The influx of Anglo-Americans from the eastern U.S., which include African Americans and recent European immigrants, reshaped the state's economy, culture, and politics. Into the late 19th century, the majority of New Mexicans remained ethnic mestizos of mixed Spanish and Native American ancestry, primarily Pueblo, Navajo, Apache, Janizaro, and Comanche, many of whom had roots going back to Spanish settlement in the 16th century. This distinctly New Mexican ethnic group became known as Hispanos and developed a more pronounced identity vis-a-vis the newer Anglo arrivals. Politically, they still controlled most town and county offices through local elections, and wealthy ranching families commanded considerable influence, preferring business, legislative, and judicial relations with fellow indigenous New Mexican groups. By contrast, Anglo-Americans, who were outnumbered, but well-organized and growing 50 tended to have more ties to the territorial government, whose officials were appointed by the U.S. federal government. Subsequently, newer residents of New Mexico generally favored maintaining territorial status, which they saw as a check on Native and Hispano influence. A consequence of the Civil War was intensifying conflict with indigenous peoples, which was part of the broader American Indian Wars along the frontier. The withdrawal of troops and material for the war effort had prompted raids by hostile tribes, and the federal government moved to subdue the many native communities that had been effectively autonomous throughout the colonial period. Following the elimination of the Confederate threat, Brigadier General James Carleton, who had assumed command of the Military Department of New Mexico in 1862, led what he described as a merciless war against all hostile tribes that aimed to force them to their knees, and then confine them to reservations where they could be Christianized and instructed in agriculture. 51. With famed frontiersman Kit Carson placed in charge of troops in the field, powerful indigenous groups, such as the Navajo, Mescalero Apache, Kiowa, and Comanche were brutally pacified through a scorched earth policy, and thereafter forced into barren and remote reservations. Sporadic conflicts continued into the late 1880s, most notably the guerrilla campaigns led by Apache chiefs Victorio and his son-in-law Nana. Nevertheless, prominent figures from across these communities, and from both the Democratic and Republican parties, attempted to fight this prejudice and forge a more cohesive, multi-ethnic New Mexican identity. They include lawmen Baca and Garrett, and Governors Curry, Hagerman, and Otero. 5354. Geography. With a total area of 121,590 square miles, 314,900 square kilometers. 1. New Mexico is the fifth largest state, after Alaska, Texas, California. Its eastern border lies along 103W longitude with the state of Oklahoma, and to 0.2 miles 3.5 kilometers west of 103W longitude with Texas, due to a 19th century surveying error. 80. On the southern border, Texas makes up the eastern two-thirds, while the Mexican states of Chihuahua and Sonora make up the western third, with Chihuahua making up about 90% of that. The western border with Arizona runs along the 10903 longitude. 86. The southwestern corner of the state is known as the Boot Heel. The 37N parallel forms the northern boundary with Colorado. The states of New Mexico, Colorado, Arizona, and Utah come together at the Four Corners in New Mexico's northwestern corner. Its surface water area is about 290 square miles, 760 square kilometers. One, despite its popular depiction as mostly arid desert, New Mexico has one of the most diverse landscapes of any U.S. state, ranging from wide, auburn-colored deserts and verdant grasslands to broken mesas and high, snow-capped peaks. 87, close to a third of the state, is covered in timberland, with heavily forested mountain wilderness. The Sangre de Cristo Mountains, the southernmost part of the Rocky Mountains, run roughly north-south along the east side of the Rio Grande in the rugged, pastoral north. The Great Plains extend into the eastern third of the state, most notably the Llano Estacado Staked Plain, whose westernmost boundary is marked by the Mescalero Ridge Escarpment. The northwestern quadrant of New Mexico is dominated by the Colorado Plateau, characterized by unique volcanic formations, dry grasslands and shrublands, open pinyon juniper woodland, and mountain forests. 88. The Chihuahuan Desert, which is the largest in North America, extends through the south. Over 4/5 of New Mexico is higher than 4,000 feet, 1,200 meters, above sea level. The average elevation ranges from up to 8,000 feet to 1,400 meters above sea level in the northwest, to less than 4,000 feet in the southeast. 87. The highest point is Wheeler Peak at over 13,160 feet, 4,010 meters in the Sangre de Cristo Mountains, while the lowest is the Red Bluff Reservoir at around 2,840 feet, 870 meters, in the southeastern corner of the state. In addition to the Rio Grande, which is tied for the fourth longest river in the U.S., New Mexico has for other major river systems the Pecos, Canadian, San Juan, and Gila. 89. Nearly bisecting New Mexico from north to south, the Rio Grande has played an influential role in the region's history. Its fertile floodplain has supported human habitation since prehistoric times, and European settlers initially lived exclusively in its valleys and along its tributaries. 87. The Pecos, which flows roughly parallel to the Rio Grande at its east, was a popular route for explorers, as was the Canadian River, which rises in the mountainous north and flows east across the arid plains. The San Juan and Gila lie west of the Continental Divide, in the northwest and southwest, respectively. With the exception of the Gila, all major rivers are dammed in New Mexico and provide a major water source for irrigation and flood control. Irrigation, also referred to as watering of plants, is the practice of applying controlled amounts of water to land to help grow crops, landscape plants, and lawns. Irrigation has been a key aspect of agriculture for over 5,000 years and has been developed by many cultures around the world. Irrigation helps to grow crops, maintain landscapes, and revegetate disturbed soils in dry areas and during times of below-average rainfall. It is also used to cool livestock, reduce dust, dispose of sewage, and support mining operations. Drainage, which involves the removal of surface and subsurface water from a given location, is often studied in conjunction with irrigation. There are several methods of irrigation that differ in how water is supplied to plants. Surface irrigation, also known as gravity irrigation, is the oldest form of irrigation and has been in use for thousands of years. In sprinkler irrigation, water is piped to one or more central locations within the field and distributed by overhead high-pressure water devices. Microirrigation is a system that distributes water under low pressure through a piped network and applies it as a small discharge to each plant. Microirrigation uses less pressure and water flow than sprinkler irrigation. Drip irrigation delivers water directly to the root zone of plants. Subirrigation has been used in field crops in areas with high water tables for many years. It involves artificially raising the water table to moisten the soil below the root zone of plants. Irrigation water can come from groundwater extracted from springs or by using wells, from surface water withdrawn from rivers, lakes, or reservoirs, or from non-conventional sources like treated wastewater, desalinated water, drainage water, or fog collection. Irrigation can be supplementary to rainfall, which is common in many parts of the world as rain-fed agriculture, or it can be full irrigation, where crops rarely rely on any contribution from rainfall. Full irrigation is less common and only occurs in arid landscapes with very low rainfall or when crops are grown in semi-arid areas outside of rainy seasons. The environmental effects of irrigation relate to the changes in quantity and quality of soil and water as a result of irrigation and the subsequent effects on natural and social conditions in river, basins, and downstream of an irrigation scheme. The effects stem from the altered hydrological conditions caused by the installation and operation of the irrigation scheme. Amongst some of these problems is depletion of underground aquifers through overdrafting. Soil can be over-irrigated due to poor distribution uniformity or management wastes water, chemicals, and may lead to water pollution. Over-irrigation can cause deep drainage from rising water tables that can lead to problems of irrigation salinity requiring waterable control by some form of subsurface land drainage. Climate: New Mexico has long been known for its dry, temperate climate. 87 overall, the state is semi-arid to arid, with areas of continental and alpine climates at higher elevations. New Mexico's statewide average precipitation is 13.7 inches 350 millimeters a year, with average monthly amounts peaking in the summer, particularly in the more rugged north-central area around Albuquerque and in the south. Generally, the eastern third of the state receives the most rainfall, while the western third receives the least. Higher altitudes receive around 40 inches 1,000 millimeters, while the lowest elevations see as little as 8 to 10 inches 200 to 250 millimeters. 87 annual temperatures can range from 65 F-18C in the southeast to below 40 degrees Fahrenheit for C in the northern mountains, 86 with the average being the mid-50s F-12C. During the summer, daytime temperatures can often exceed 100 F-38 Celsius at elevations below 5,000 feet, 1,500 meters. The average high temperature in July ranges from 99 F-37 Celsius at the lower elevations down to 78 degrees Fahrenheit 26 C at the higher elevations. In the colder months of November to March, many cities in New Mexico can have nighttime temperature lows in the teens above zero or lower. The highest temperature recorded in New Mexico was 122 degrees Fahrenheit 50 Celsius at the Waste Isolation Pilot Plant WIPP near Loving on June 27, 1994. The lowest recorded temperature is 57 degrees Fahrenheit 49 C at Ceniza near Jamestown on January 13, 1963. 90 to New Mexico's stable climate and sparse population provides for clearer skies and less light pollution, making it a popular site for several major astronomical observatories, including the Apache Point Observatory, the Very Large Array, and the Magdalena Ridge Observatory, among others. 9394 Flora and Fauna Greeter Roadrunner, the state bird of New Mexico. Owing to its varied topography, New Mexico has 6 distinct vegetation zones that provide diverse sets of habitats for many plants and animals. 95 The Upper Sonoran Zone is by far the most prominent, constituting about 3/4 of the state. It includes most of the plains, foothills, and valleys above 4,500 feet, and is defined by prairie grasses, low pippin pines, and juniper shrubs. The Llano Estacado in the east features shortgrass prairie with blue grama, which sustain bison. The Chihuahuan Desert in the south is characterized by shrubby creosote. The Colorado Plateau in the northwest corner of New Mexico is high desert with cold winters, featuring sagebrush, shade scale, greasewood, and other plants adapted to the saline and saliniferous soil. The mountainous north hosts a wide array of vegetation types corresponding to elevation gradients, such as pippin juniper woodlands near the base, through evergreen conifers, spruce fir and aspen forests in the transitionary zone, and crumholes, and alpine tundra at the very top. 95. The Appalachian Zone tucked into the southwestern boot heel of the state has high calcium soil, oak woodlands, Arizona cypress, and other plants that are not found in other parts of the state. 96-97, the southern sections of the Rio Grande and Pecos valleys have 20,000 square miles, 52,000 square kilometers of New Mexico's best grazing land and irrigated farmland. New Mexico's varied climate and vegetation zones consequently support diverse wildlife. Black bears, bighorn sheep, bobcats, cougars, deer, and elk live in habitats above 7,000 feet, while coyotes, jackrabbits, kangaroo rats, javelina, porcupines, pronghorn antelope, western diamondbacks, and wild turkeys live in less mountainous and elevated regions. 98, 99, 100. The iconic roadrunner, which is the state bird, is abundant in the southeast. Endangered species include the Mexican gray wolf, which is being gradually reintroduced in the world, and Rio Grande silvery minnow. 101. Over 500 species of birds live or migrate through New Mexico, third only to California and Mexico. 100 to conservation. New Mexico and 12 other western states together account for 93% of all federally owned land in the U.S., roughly one-third of the state, or 24.7 million of 77.8 million acres, is held by the U.S. government, the 10th highest percentage in the country. More than half this land is under the Bureau of Land Management as either public domain land or national conservation lands, while another third is managed by the U.S. Forest Service as national forests. 103. New Mexico was central to the early 20th century conservation movement, with Gila Wilderness being designated the world's first wilderness area in 1924. 104. The state also hosts 9 of the country's 84 national monuments, the most of any state after Arizona. These include the second oldest monument, El Morro, which was created in 1906, and the Gila Cliff Dwellings, proclaimed in 1907. 104. National forests in New Mexico. Carson National Forest is a national forest in northern New Mexico, United States. It encompasses 6,070 square kilometers, 1.5 million acres, and is administered by the United States Forest Service. The Forest Service's mixed-use policy allows for its use for recreation, grazing, and resource extraction. Geography. The forest is disjunct with 4 separate areas managed by 6 ranger districts. On the east side in the Sangre de Cristo Mountains are 2 districts that are separated by the Taos Pueblo. The west side of the forest has 3 conjoined districts in the San Juan Mountains, sandwiched between the Santa Fe and Rio Grande National Forests, and another in the San Juan Basin. 3. The forest is located mainly in Rio Arriba 63.4% of acreage and Taos 30.65% counties, but smaller areas extend eastward into western Mora and Colfax counties. For Wheeler Peak, the highest mountain in New Mexico at 13,161 feet for 1,011 meters, is located in the National Forest. The Cibola National Forest, pronounced Cibola, is a 1,633,783 acre, 6,611.7 square kilometers, United States National Forest in New Mexico, U.S. The name Cibola is thought to be the original Zuni Indian name for their pueblos or tribal lands. The name was later interpreted by the Spanish to mean buffalo. 3. The forest is disjointed with land spread across central and northern New Mexico, West Texas, and Oklahoma. The Cibola National Forest is divided into 4 ranger districts: the Sandia, Mountainair, MT, Taylor, and Magdalena. The forest includes the San Mateo, Magdalena, Datil, Bear, Galena, Manzano, Sandia, MT Taylor, and Zuni Mountains of west-central New Mexico. The forest also manages for national grasslands that stretch from northeastern New Mexico eastward into the Texas Panhandle and western Oklahoma. The Cibola National Forest and grassland is administered by Region 3 of the United States Forest Service from offices in Albuquerque, New Mexico. Elevation ranges from 5,000 feet, 1,500 meters, to 11,301 feet 3,445 meters. The preceding figures do not include any of the four national grasslands mentioned below, which are detailed in their individual articles. The descending order of Cibola National Forest acres, not counting the 3 grassland areas by county, are Socorro, Cibola, McKinley, Catron, Torrance, Bernalillo, Sandoval County, New Mexico, Lincoln, Sierra, and Valencia counties in New Mexico. The Cibola National Forest currently has 137,701 acres designated as wilderness. In addition to these acres, it has 246,000 acres classified as inventoried roadless areas pursuant to the Roadless Area Conservation Rule. For Lincoln National Forest is a unit of the U.S. Forest Service located in southern New Mexico. The Lincoln National Forest covers an extensive 1.1 million acres in southeastern New Mexico, 3 established by presidential proclamation in 1902 as the Lincoln Forest Reserve, the 1,103, 897 acres for 1,467.31 square kilometers forest begins near the Texas border and contains lands in parts of Chaves, Eddy, Lincoln, and Otero counties. The Lincoln National Forest is home to 3 major mountain ranges: Sacramento, Guadalupe, and Capitan. 3. The 3 ranger districts within the forest contain all or part of a total of 4 mountain ranges and include a variety of different environmental areas, from desert to heavily forested mountains and subalpine grasslands. Clean air, water, and soil are necessary elements that the national forests contribute to the environment. For established to balance conservation, resource management, and recreation. The lands of the Lincoln National Forest include important local timber resources, protected wilderness areas, and popular recreation and winter sports areas. The forest headquarters is located in Alamogordo and with local offices in Carlsbad, Cloudcroft, and Ruidoso. The Santa Fe National Forest is a protected national forest in northern New Mexico in the southwestern United States. It was established in 1915 and covers 1,558,452 acres, 6,306.83 square kilometers. Elevations range from 5,300 feet, 1,600 meters, to 13,103 feet, for 1,000 meters at the summit of Truchas Peak, located within the Pecos Wilderness. The Jemez, Coyote, and Cuba districts are located in the Jemez Mountains. The Pecos, Las Vegas district is located in the Sangre de Cristo Mountains, and the Espanola district is located in both mountain ranges. In descending order of land area, the forest lies in parts of Rio Arriba, San Miguel, Sandoval, Santa Fe, Mora, and Los Alamos counties. Forest headquarters are located in the city of Santa Fe. Santa Fe National Forest was established on July 1, 1915 by the U.S. Forest Service with the amalgamation of Jemez National Forest to the west of Santa Fe and Pecos National Forest to the east. 3. The former division is remembered in the Ranger districts, with the Jemez Ranger District to the west and the Pecos, Las Vegas District to the east. The Western District is adjacent to the Vales Caldera National Preserve, which is administered by the National Park Service. Bandelier National Monument was created from a portion of Santa Fe in 1916, but additional land was added to Bandelier from land that was formerly part of Los Alamos National Laboratory and from land that was owned by the Dunnigans when they owned the Baca Ranch. For the Gila National Forest is a United States National Forest in New Mexico. Established in 1905, it now covers approximately 2,710,659 acres, 10,969.65 square kilometers, making it the 6th largest national forest in the continental United States. The Forest Administration also managed the part of the Apache National Forest in New Mexico, which covers 614,200 acres for a total of 3.3 million acres managed by the Gila National Forest. Within the forest, the Gila Wilderness was established in 1924 as the U.S.'s first designated wilderness. The Aldo Leopold Wilderness and Blue Range Wilderness are also found within its borders. The Blue Range primitive area lies within Arizona in the neighboring Apache National Forest. Gila Wilderness was designated the world's first wilderness area on June 3, 1924. 1. Along with Aldo Leopold Wilderness and Blue Range Wilderness, the 558,014-acre, 225,820 hectares, 872 square mi wilderness is part of New Mexico's Gila National Forest. The wilderness is approximately 27 miles 43 kilometers from north to south and 39 miles 63 kilometers east to west. Two U.S. wilderness areas do not allow motorized or mechanized vehicles, including bicycles. Camping, hunting, and fishing are allowed with proper permit, but no roads, buildings, logging, or mining are permitted. Wilderness areas within national forests and Bureau of Land Management areas allow hunting in season. The Gila Wilderness is located in southwest New Mexico, north of Silver City and east of Reserve. It contains the West Fork, Middle Fork, and much of the East Fork of the Gila River. Riverside elevations of around 4,850 feet, 1,480 meters, are the lowest in the wilderness. The Mogollon Mountains traverse and arc across the wilderness. The tallest peak within this range, Whitewater Baldy at 10,895 feet, 3,321 meters, is in the northwest part of the wilderness along with several other summits, more than 10,000 feet, 3,048 meters high. At the northeast corner is prominent Black Mountain, rising to 9,287 feet, 2,831 meters of 3. The Gila Cliff Dwellings National Monument is adjacent to the wilderness. For the Gila Wilderness is the largest designated wilderness area in New Mexico. The Coronado National Forest is a United States national forest that includes an area of about 1.78 million acres, 7,200 square kilometers spread throughout mountain ranges in southeastern Arizona and southwestern New Mexico. It is located in parts of Cochise, Graham, Santa Cruz, Pima, and Pinal counties in Arizona, and Hidalgo County in New Mexico. History: in 1902, the land that is now part of Coronado National Forest was included as part of the Santa Rita Forest Reserve. This was transferred to the U.S. Forest Service in 1905, and the Coronado National Forest was established in 1908. During a party in 2017, the sawmill fire ignited and went out of control. The fire went on for many days. Approximately 47,000 acres, 19,000 hectares, were burnt. The person behind the fire was an off-duty U.S. Border Patrol agent. He was fined and given probation. The Arizona Department of Emergency and Military Affairs constructed a 3,800-foot, 1,200 meters length of wall in 2022 on federal and tribal lands near Yuma, without federal permission. The National Forest Supervisor told the state to refrain from placing more shipping containers along the Arizona border with Mexico without obtaining proper authorization. 3. Governor Doug Ducey filed a lawsuit in October against federal agencies that have sought to force the removal of the initial 130 containers used as a wall on the border. For Governor-elect Katie Hobbs had stated an intention to remove the containers after taking office. 5. The state has agreed to remove the containers starting January 2023. 6. National parks in New Mexico. New Mexico's national parks, together with national monuments and trails managed by the National Park Service, are listed as follows. 105. The United States has 63 national parks, which are congressionally designated protected areas operated by the National Park Service, an agency of the Department of the Interior. 1. National parks are designated for their natural beauty, unique geological features, diverse ecosystems, and recreational opportunities, typically because of some outstanding scenic feature or natural phenomena. 2. While legislatively all units of the national park system are considered equal with the same mission, national parks are generally larger and more of a destination. and hunting and extractive activities are prohibited. 3 national monuments, on the other hand, are also frequently protected for their historical or archaeological significance. 8 national parks, including 6 in Alaska, are paired with a national preserve, areas with different levels of protection that are administered together but considered separate units and whose areas are not included in the figures below. The 433 units of the national park system can be broadly referred to as national parks, but most have other formal designations. For a bill creating the first national park, Yellowstone, was signed into law by President Ulysses S. Grant in 1872, followed by Mackinac National Park in 1875, decommissioned in 1895, and then Rock Creek Park later merged into National Capital Parks, Sequoia, and Yosemite in 1890. The Organic Act of 1916 created the National Park Service to conserve the scenery and the natural and historic objects and wildlife therein, and to provide for the enjoyment of the same in such manner and by such means as will leave them unimpaired for the enjoyment of future generations. 5 many current national parks had been previously protected as national monuments by the President under the Antiquities Act or as other designations created by Congress. Before being redesignated by Congress, the newest national park is New River Gorge, previously a national river, and the most recent entirely new park is National Park of American Samoa. A few former national parks are no longer designated as such or have been disbanded. 14 national parks are designated UNESCO World Heritage Sites, WHS, 6, and 21 national parks are named UNESCO Biosphere Reserves, BR, 7, with 8 national parks in both programs. 30 states have national parks, as do the territories of American Samoa and the U.S. Virgin Islands. The state with the most national parks is California with 9, followed by Alaska with 8, Utah with 5, and Colorado with 4. The largest national park is Wrangell St. Elias in Alaska, at over 8 million acres, 32,375 square kilometers. It is larger than each of the 9 smallest states. The next 3 largest parks are also in Alaska. The smallest park is Gateway Arch National Park, Missouri, at 190.83 acres, 0.78. The total area protected by national parks is approximately 50.4 million acres to 112,000 square kilometers, for an average of 833,000 acres, 3,370 square kilometers, but a median of only 220,000 acres, 890 square kilometers. 8. The national parks set a visitation record in 2024, with more than 94 million visitors. 9. Great Smoky Mountains National Park in North Carolina and Tennessee has been the most visited park since 1944, 10, and had over 12 million visitors in 2024. 9. In contrast, about 11,900 people visited the remote gates of the Arctic National Park and Preserve in Alaska in 2024. 9. The Aztec Ruins National Monument in northwestern New Mexico, United States, consists of preserved structures constructed by the Pueblo Indians. The national monument lies on the western bank of the Animas River in Aztec, New Mexico, about 12 miles 19 kilometers northeast of Farmington. Additional Puebloan structures can be found in Salmon Ruins and Heritage Park, 9.5 miles 15.3 kilometers south. Archaeological evidence puts the construction of the ruins in the 12th and 13th centuries. The Puebloan-built ruins were dubbed the Aztec Ruins by 19th century American settlers who misattributed their construction to the Aztecs. 5. The site was declared Aztec Ruin National Monument on January 24, 1923. Ruin was changed to Ruins after a boundary change on July 2, 1928. As a historical property of the National Park Service, the monument was administratively listed on the National Register of Historic Places on October 15, 1966. The United Nations Educational, Scientific, and Cultural Organization UNESCO listed the Chaco culture as a World Heritage Site on December 8, 1987. That listing specifically included the Aztec ruins. 6. The monument is on the Trail of the Ancient Scenic Byway, one of New Mexico's scenic byways. 7. The property was part of a 160-acre, 65 hectares homestead owned by H.D. Abrams, who supported the preservation of the ruins. The H.D. Abrams House in Aztec is listed on the National Register of Historic Places. 8. White Rock is an unincorporated community and census-designated place CDP in Los Alamos County, New Mexico. It is one of two major population centers in the county. The other is Los Alamos, the county seat. The population was 5,725 at the 2010 census. 5. It is largely a bedroom community for employees of Los Alamos National Laboratory and their families. Access to White Rock from the town of Los Alamos and other cities and towns in New Mexico is via New Mexico State Road 4, which forms the northwestern boundary of the community. Administratively, White Rock is a neighborhood of Los Alamos. Citation needed: locals refer to Los Alamos, meaning not White Rock, as the town site or the hill. White Sands National Park is a national park of the United States located in New Mexico and completely surrounded by the White Sands Missile Range. The park covers 145,762 acres to 127.8 square miles, 589.9 square kilometers in the Tularosa Basin, including the southern 41% of a 275 square miles, 710 square kilometers, field of white sand dunes composed of gypsum crystals. This gypsum dune field is the largest of its kind on Earth, 7 with a depth of about 30 feet 9.1 meters, dunes as tall as 60 feet 18 meters, and about 4.5 billion short tons for 0.1 billion metric tons of gypsum sand. Approximately 12,000 years ago, the land within the Tularosa Basin featured large lakes, streams, grasslands, and Ice Age mammals. As the climate warmed, rain and snowmelt dissolved gypsum from the surrounding mountains and carried it into the basin. Further warming and drying caused the lakes to evaporate and form selenite crystals. Strong winds then broke up crystals and transported them eastward. A similar process continues to produce gypsum sand today. 8,000 of species of animal inhabit the park, a large portion of which are invertebrates. Several animal species feature a white or off-white coloration. At least 45 species are endemic, living only in this park, with 40 of them being moth species. The Tularosa Basin has also seen a number of human inhabitants, from Paleo-Indians 12,000 years ago to modern farmers, ranchers, and miners. White Sands National Park was originally designated White Sands National Monument on January 18, 1933, by President Herbert Hoover. Since 1941, the park has been completely surrounded by the military installations of White Sands Missile Range and Holloman Air Force Base. It was redesignated as a national park by Congress and signed into law by President Donald Trump on December 20, 2019. It is the most visited NPS site in New Mexico, with about 600,000 visitors each year. 9. The park features a drive from the Visitor Center to the heart of the dunes, picnic areas, backcountry campground in the dune field, marked hiking trails, and sledding on the dunes. Ranger-guided orientation and nature walks occur at various times and months throughout the year. National conservation lands in New Mexico's national monuments, conservation areas, and other units of the National Landscape Conservation System are managed by the Bureau of Land Management. Units include, but are not limited to, 106 national conservation lands, formerly known as the National Landscape Conservation System, is a 35 million acre 140 square kilometers collection of lands in 873 federally recognized areas considered to be the crown jewels of the American West. 1. These lands represent 10% of the 258 million acres, 1,040,000 square kilometers, managed by the Bureau of Land Management (BLM). The BLM is the largest federal public land manager and is responsible for over 40% of all the federal public land in the nation. The other major federal public land managers include the U.S. Forest Service, USFS, National Park Service, NPS, and the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, USFWS. The BLM historically has managed lands under its jurisdiction for extractive uses, such as mining, logging, grazing, and oil and gas production. In 1996, President Clinton underscored non-extractive priorities on BLM lands when he established the first national monument to be administered by the BLM, the Grand Staircase Escalante National Monument, in southern Utah. The Bureau of Land Management's National Landscape Conservation System, better known as the National Conservation Lands, was created in 2000 with the mission to conserve, protect, and restore these nationally significant landscapes that have outstanding cultural, ecological, and scientific values for the benefit of current and future generations. Headquartered in Washington, D.C., the BLM oversees more than 247.3 million acres, 1,001,000 square kilometers of land, or 1/8 of the United States' total land mass. 3. The Bureau was created by Congress during the presidency of Harry S. Truman in 1946 by combining two existing agencies, the United States General Land Office and the Grazing Service. 4. The agency manages the federal government's nearly 700 million acres to 1,800,000 square kilometers of subsurface mineral estate located beneath federal, state, and private lands severed from their surface rights by the Homestead Act of 1862. For most, BLM public lands are located in these 12 western states: Alaska, Arizona, California, Colorado, Idaho, Montana, Nevada, New Mexico, Oregon, Utah, Washington, and Wyoming. 5. The mission of the BLM is to sustain the health, diversity, and productivity of the public lands for the use and enjoyment of present and future generations. 6. Originally, BLM holdings were described as land nobody wanted because homesteaders had passed them by. 5. All the same, ranchers hold nearly 18,000 permits and leases for livestock grazing on 155 million acres, 630,000 square kilometers of BLM public lands. 7. The agency manages 221 wilderness areas, 29 national monuments, and some 636 other protected areas as part of the National Conservation Lands, formerly known as the National Landscape Conservation System. 1,000, totaling about 36 million acres, 150,000 square kilometers. 8. In addition, the National Conservation Lands include nearly 2,400 miles of wild and scenic rivers, 9, and nearly 6,000 miles of national scenic and historic trails. 10. There are more than 63,000 oil and gas wells on BLM public lands. Total energy leases generated approximately $5.4 billion in 2013, an amount divided among the Treasury, the states, and Native American groups. 11, 12, 13. National wildlife refuges in New Mexico. New Mexico's national wildlife refuges are managed by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. Units include the National Wildlife Refuge System. NWRS is a system of protected areas of the United States managed by the United States Fish and Wildlife Service, FWS, an agency within the Department of the Interior. The National Wildlife Refuge System is the system of public lands and waters set aside to conserve America's fish, wildlife, and plants. Since President Theodore Roosevelt designated Florida's Pelican Island National Wildlife Refuge as the first wildlife refuge in 1903, the system has grown to over 568 national wildlife refuges and 38 wetland management districts, encompassing about 859 million acres, 3,476,200 square kilometers. The United States Fish and Wildlife Service, USFWS, or FWS, is a U.S. federal government agency within the United States Department of the Interior, which oversees the management of fish, wildlife, and natural habitats in the United States. The mission of the agency is working with others to conserve, protect, and enhance fish, wildlife, plants, and their habitats for the continuing benefit of the American people. 1. Among the responsibilities of the USFWS are enforcing federal wildlife laws, protecting endangered species, managing migratory birds, restoring nationally significant fisheries, conserving and restoring wildlife habitats, such as wetlands, helping foreign governments in international conservation efforts, and distributing money to fish and wildlife agencies of U.S. states through the Wildlife Sport, Fish and Restoration Program. 10. The vast majority of fish and wildlife habitats are on state or private land not controlled by the United States government. Therefore, the USFWS works closely with private groups, such as Partners in Flight and the Sport Fishing and Boating Partnership Council, to promote voluntary habitat conservation and restoration. The Fish and Wildlife Service was created in 1940 through the combination of two previous bureaus within the Department of the Interior. USFWS employs approximately 8,000 people and is organized into a central administrative office in Falls Church, Virginia, 8 regional offices, and nearly 700 field offices distributed throughout the United States. State parks in New Mexico areas managed by the New Mexico State Parks Division. Blue Water Lake State Park is a state park in Pruitt, New Mexico, United States, located in the Zuni Mountains 30 miles 48 kilometers west of Grants. 2. The park itself encompasses approximately 3,000 acres 12 square kilometers, and the lake has a surface area of approximately 1,200 acres for 0.9 square kilometers. The park is popular for fishing and bird watching, with 68 different species of birds either calling the park home or passing through the park on their annual migrations. The lake is stocked with rainbow trout, cutthroat trout, tiger muskie, and channel catfish. Its high altitude, 7,400 feet, and location in northern New Mexico cause the lake to freeze over in the winter, allowing ice fishing to take place. While there are no designated equestrian trails, horseback riding is allowed throughout the park except within 10 feet of the lake. Bottomless Lake State Park is a state park in the U.S. state of New Mexico, located along the Pecos River, about 15 miles 24 kilometers southeast of Roswell. Established in 1933, it was the first state park in New Mexico. 2. It takes its name from 9 small, deep lakes located along the eastern escarpment of the Pecos River Valley. Bottomless Lake State Park is a state park in the U.S. state of New Mexico, located along the Pecos River, about 15 miles 24 kilometers southeast of Roswell. Established in 1933, it was the first state park in New Mexico. 2. It takes its name from 9 small, deep lakes located along the eastern escarpment of the Pecos River Valley. Morphy Lake State Park is a state park of New Mexico, United States, located 7 miles 11 kilometers southwest of Mora in the Sangre de Cristo Mountains. 2. The park is one of New Mexico's smaller state parks, at only 30 acres, 120,000 square meters, and the lake has a surface area of approximately 15 acres, 61,000 square meters. The park is popular for fishing, camping, and picnicking. However, there is no running water, so visitors must pack their own. The lake is stocked with trout and kokanee salmon. Boats are allowed on the lake, but no gas-powered motors are allowed. Its high altitude, 8,000 feet, and location in northern New Mexico cause the lake to freeze over in the winter, allowing ice fishing to take place. The 2020 census recorded a population of 2,117,522, an increase of 2.8% from 2,059,179 in the 2010 census. 121. This was the lowest rate of growth in the western U.S. after Wyoming, and among the slowest nationwide. 122. By comparison, between 2000 and 2010, New Mexico's population increased by 11.7% from 1,819,046, among the fastest growth rates in the country. 123. A report commissioned in 2021 by the New Mexico legislature attributed the state's slow growth to a negative net migration rate, particularly among those 18 or younger, and to a 19% decline in the birth rate. 122, however, growth among Hispanics and Native Americans remained healthy. 120 for the U.S. Census Bureau estimated a slight decrease in population, with 3,333 fewer people from July 2021 to July 2022. 125. This was attributed to deaths exceeding births by roughly 5,000, with net migration mitigating the loss by 1,389. 125 more than half of New Mexicans, 51.4%, were born in the state. 37.9% were born in another state. 1.1% were born in either Puerto Rico, an island territory, or abroad to at least one American parent, and 9.4% were foreign-born, compared to a national average of roughly 12%. 126, almost a quarter of the population, 22.7%, was under the age of 18, and the state's median age of 38.4 is slightly above the national average. New Mexico's somewhat older population is partly reflective of its popularity among retirees. It ranked as the most popular retirement destination in 2018. 127, with an estimated 42% of new residents being retired. 128, Hispanics and Latinos constitute nearly half of all residents, 49.3%, giving New Mexico the highest proportion of Hispanic ancestry among the 50 states. This broad classification includes descendants of Spanish colonists who settled between the 16th and 18th centuries, as well as recent immigrants from Latin America, particularly Mexico, and Central America. The 2020 census recorded a slightly reduced poverty rate of 18.2%, albeit the third highest among U.S. states, compared to a national average of 10.5%. Likewise, the Census Bureau estimated that roughly 43% of the state's population, about 900,000 people, live in such hard-to-count areas. 122. In response, the New Mexico government invested heavily in public outreach to increase census participation, resulting in a final tally that exceeded earlier estimates and outperformed several neighboring states. 130. According to HUD's 2022 Annual Homeless Assessment Report, there were an estimated 2,560 homeless people in New Mexico. 131. 132. Race and ethnicity. Ethnic origins in New Mexico. New Mexico is one of 7 majority-minority states where non-Hispanic whites constitute less than half the population. 133. As early as 1940, roughly half the population was estimated to be non-white. 134. Before becoming a state in 1912, New Mexico was among the few U.S. territories that was predominantly non-white, which contributed to its delayed admission into the Union. 135. The largest ethnic group is Hispanic and Latino Americans. According to the 2020 census, they account for nearly half the state's population, at 47.7%. They include Hispanos descended from pre-United States settlers and more recent successions of Mexican Americans. 136. Some 200,000 residents, about 1/10 of the population, are of indigenous descent. 137, ranking third in size. 138, and second proportionally. 139 nationwide. There are 23 federally recognized tribal nations, each with its distinct culture, history, and identity. Both the Navajo and Apache share a Athabascan origin, with the latter living on 3 federal reservations in the state. 140. The Navajo Nation, which spans over 16 million acres, 6.5 million hectares, mostly in neighboring Arizona, is the largest reservation in the U.S., with 1/3 of its members living in New Mexico. 137 Pueblo Indians, who share a similar lifestyle but are culturally and linguistically distinct, live in 19 pueblos scattered throughout the state, which collectively span over 2 million acres, 800,000 hectares. 141. Many indigenous New Mexicans have moved to urban areas throughout the state, and some cities, such as Gallup, are major hubs of Native American culture. 142. New Mexico is also a hub for indigenous communities beyond its borders. The annual Gathering of Nations, which began in 1983, has been described as the largest powwow in the U.S., drawing hundreds of native tribes from across North America. 143. Almost half of New Mexicans claim Hispanic origin. Many are descendants of colonial settlers, called Hispanos or Neo-Mexicanos, who settled mostly in the north of the state between the 16th and 18th centuries. By contrast, the majority of Mexican immigrants reside in the south. Some Hispanos claim Jewish ancestry through descendants from conversos or crypto-Jews among early Spanish colonists. 140. For many New Mexicans speak a unique dialect known as New Mexican Spanish, which was shaped by the region's historical isolation and various cultural influences. New Mexican Spanish lacks certain vocabulary from other Spanish dialects and uses numerous Native American words for local features, as well as anglicized words that express American concepts and modern inventions. 145. New Mexico has the fourth largest Native American community in the U.S., at over 200,000, comprising roughly 1/10 of all residents. This is the second largest population by percentage after Alaska. 146. 147. New Mexico is also the only state, besides Alaska, where indigenous people have maintained a stable proportion of the population for over a century. In 1890, Native Americans made up 9.4% of New Mexico's population, almost the same percentage as in 2020. 148. By contrast, during that same period, neighboring Arizona went from 1/3 indigenous to less than 5%. 148. New Mexico's population consists of many mestizo, Indo-Hispano groups, including Hispanos of Osis American descent and indigenous Mexican American with Mesoamerican ancestry. 149. 150. Religion. Also, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints in New Mexico. Religious self-identification. Per Public Religion Research Institute's 2022 American Values Survey, 180, Catholicism 35.30 for 0.7%, Protestantism 26.7%, Mormonism 0.99%, unaffiliated 30.7%, New Age for 3.96%, Buddhism 0.99%, other to 1.98%. Like most U.S. states, New Mexico is predominantly Christian, with Roman Catholicism and Protestantism each constituting roughly 1/3 of the population. According to Association of Religion Data Archives (ARDA), the largest denominations in 2010 were the Catholic Church, 684,941 members, the Southern Baptist Convention, 113, 452, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, 67,637, and the United Methodist Church, 36,424. 181. Approximately 1/5 of residents are unaffiliated with any religion, which includes atheists, agnostics, deists. A 2020 study by the Public Religion Research Institute, PRRI, determined 67% of the population were Christian, with Roman Catholics constituting the largest denominational group. 182. In 2022, the PRRI estimated 63% of the population were Christian. 183. San Miguel Chapel, built in 1610 in Santa Fe, is the oldest church structure in the continental U.S. Roman Catholicism is deeply rooted in New Mexico's history and culture, going back to its settlement by the Spanish in the early 17th century. The oldest Christian church in the continental U.S., and the third oldest in any U.S. state or territory, is the San Miguel Mission in Santa Fe, which was built in 1610. Within the hierarchy of the Catholic Church, New Mexico belongs to the ecclesiastical province of Santa Fe. The state has 3 ecclesiastical districts, 180 for the Archdiocese of Santa Fe, the Diocese of Gallup, and the Diocese of Las Cruces. 185. Evangelicalism and non-denominational Christianity have seen growth in the state since the late 20th century. The Billy Graham Evangelistic Association has hosted numerous events in New Mexico. 186, 187, and Albuquerque has several mega churches, which have numerous satellite locations in the state, including Calvary of Albuquerque, Legacy Church, and Sagebrush Church. 188 New Mexico has been a leading center of the New Age movement since at least the 1960s, attracting adherents from across the country. 189. The state's thriving New Age network encompasses various schools of alternative medicine, holistic health, psychic healing, and new religions, as well as festivals, pilgrimage sites, spiritual retreats, and communes. 190-191, New Mexico's Japanese American community has influenced the state's religious heritage, with Shinto and Zen represented by Kagyu Shenpen Kunchab, Keiben-Chino Otagawa, Upaya Institute, and Zen Center. 192. Likewise, holism is represented in New Mexico, as are associated faiths such as Buddhism and Seventh-day Adventism. 193. 194. A Tibetan Buddhist temple is located at Zuni Mountain. Religious education, art, broadcasting, media exist across religions and faiths in New Mexico, including KHAC, KXXQ, Dar al-Islam, and Intermountain Jewish News. Christian schools in New Mexico are encouraged to receive educational accreditation, and among them are the University of the Southwest, St. Pius High School, Hope Christian, Sandia View Academy, St. Michael's High School, Las Cruces Catholic School, St. Bonaventure Indian School, and Rehoboth Christian School. Albuquerque's growing media sector has made it a popular hub for several national Christian media institutions, such as Trinity Broadcasting Network's KNAT-TV. Christian artistic expression includes the gospel tradition within New Mexico music. 195, and contemporary Christian music, such as KLYT radio station. 196. Several indigenous and Christian religious sites are registered and protected as part of regional and global cultural heritage. 197. 198. Reflecting centuries of successive migrations and settlements, New Mexico has developed a distinct syncretic folk religion that is centered on Puebloan traditions and Hispano folk, Catholicism, with some elements of Dine Bahane, Apache, Protestant, and evangelical faiths. 199. This unique religious tradition is sometimes referred to as Pueblo Christianity or Plachita Christianity, referring to both the Pueblos and Hispanic town squares. 200 customs and practices include the maintenance of acequias. 201. Pueblo and territorial style churches. 201. Ceremonial dances, such as the Matashines. 200 to 203. Religious artistic expression of Cachinas and Santos. 200 for religious holidays, celebrating saints, such as Pueblo feast days. 205 Christmas traditions of bizcochitos and farolitos or luminarias. 206, 207, and pilgrimages like that of El Santuario de Chamayo. 208. The luminaria tradition is a cultural hallmark of the Pueblos and Hispanos of New Mexico and a part of the state's distinct heritage. The luminaria custom has spread nationwide, both as a Christmas tradition as well as for other events. New Mexico's distinctive faith tradition is believed to reflect the religious naturalism of the state's indigenous and Hispano peoples, who constitute a pseudo-ethno-religious group. 209. New Mexico's leadership within otherwise disparate traditions, such as Christianity, the Native American Church, and New Age movements has been linked to its remote and ancient indigenous spirituality, which emphasized sacred connections to nature, and its over 300 years of syncretized Pueblo and Hispano religious and folk customs. 189-190. The state's remoteness has likewise been cited as attracting and fostering communities seeking the freedom to practice or cultivate new beliefs. 190 global spiritual leaders including Billy Graham and Dalai Lama, along with community leaders of Hispanic and Latino Americans and indigenous peoples of the North, American Southwest, have remarked on New Mexico being a sacred space. 210, 211, 212. According to a 2017 survey by the Pew Research Center, New Mexico ranks 18th among the 50 U.S. states in religiosity, 63% of respondents stating they believe in God with certainty, with an additional 20% being fairly certain of the existence of God, while 59% considering religion to be important in their lives and another 20% believe it to be somewhat important. 213. Among its population in 2022, 31% were unaffiliated. 183. Economy, oil and gas production, the entertainment industry, high-tech scientific research, tourism, and government spending are important drivers of the state economy. 214. The state government has an elaborate system of tax credits and technical assistance to promote job growth and business investment, especially in new technologies. 215. As of 2021, New Mexico's gross domestic product was over $95 billion, 216, compared to roughly $80 billion in 2010. 217 state GDP peaked in 2019 at nearly $99 billion, but declined in the face of the COVID-19 pandemic. In 2021, the per capita personal income was slightly over $45,800, compared to $31,470 in 2007. 218. It was the third lowest in the country after West Virginia and Mississippi. 219. The percentage of persons below the poverty level has largely plateaued in the 21st century, from 18.4% in 2005 to 18.2% in 2021. 221 traditionally dependent on resource extraction, ranching, and railroad transportation, New Mexico has increasingly shifted towards services, high-end manufacturing, and tourism. 223. Since 2017, the state has seen a steady rise in the number of annual visitors, culminating in a record-breaking 39.2 million tourists in 2021, which had a total economic income of $10 billion. 224. New Mexico has also seen greater investment in media and scientific research. Oil and gas. New Mexico is the second largest crude oil and ninth largest natural gas producer in the United States. 225. It overtook North Dakota in oil production in July 2021 and is expected to continue expanding. 226. The Permian and San Juan basins, which are located partly in New Mexico, account for some of these natural resources. In 2000, the value of oil and gas produced was $8.2 billion, 227, and in 2006, New Mexico accounted for 3.4% of the crude oil, 8.5% of the dry natural gas, and 10.2% of the natural gas liquids produced in the United States. 228. However, the boom in hydraulic fracturing and horizontal drilling since the mid-2010s led to a large increase in the production of crude oil from the Permian Basin and other U.S. sources. These developments allowed the United States to again become the world's largest producer of crude oil by 2018. 229, 230, 231, 232. New Mexico's oil and gas operations contribute to the state's above-average release of the greenhouse gas methane, including from a national methane hotspot in the Four Corners area. 233, 234, 235, 236, in common with other states in the western U.S. New Mexico receives royalties from the sale of federally owned land to oil and gas companies. 237. It has the highest proportion of federal land with oil and gas, as well as the most lucrative. Since the last amendment to the U.S. Mineral Leasing Act in 1987, New Mexico had by far the lowest percent of land sold for the minimum statutory amount of $2 per acre, at just 3%. By contrast, All of Arizona's federal land was sold at the lowest rate, followed by Oregon at 98% and Nevada at 84%. 237. The state had the fourth highest total acreage sold to the oil and gas industry at about 1.1 million acres, and the second highest number of acres currently leased fossil fuel production at 4.3 million acres. After Wyoming's 9.2 million acres, only 11% of these lands, or 474,121 acres, are idle, which is the lowest among western states. 237. Nevertheless, New Mexico has had recurring disputes and discussions with the U.S. government concerning management and revenue rights over federal land. 238. Arts and Entertainment Talbot Studios, built in 2007 for the rising demand of film production in the state, reflecting the artistic traditions of the American Southwest. New Mexican art has its origins in the folk arts of the indigenous and Hispanic peoples in the region. Pueblo pottery, Navajo rugs, and Hispano religious icons like Cachinas and Santos are recognized in the global art world. 239. Georgia O'Keeffe's presence brought international attention to the Santa Fe art scene, and today, the city has several notable art establishments and many commercial art galleries along Canyon Road. 240. As the birthplace of William Hanna and the residence of Chuck Jones, the state also connections to the animation industry. 241. 242. New Mexico provides financial incentives for film production, including tax credits valued at 25 to 40% of eligible in-state spending. 243. 244. A program enacted in 2019 provides benefits to media companies that commit to investing in the state for at least a decade and that use local talent, crew, and businesses. 245. According to the New Mexico Film Office, in 2022, film and television expenditures reached the highest recorded level at over $855 million, compared to $624 million the previous year. 246. During fiscal years 2020 to 2023, the total direct economic impact from the film tax credit was to $0.36 million. In 2018, Netflix chose New Mexico for its first U.S. production hub, pledging to spend over $1 billion over the next decade to create one of the largest film studios in North America at Albuquerque Studios. 247. Universal followed suit in 2021 with the opening of its own television film studio in the city, committing to spend $500 million in direct production and employ 330 full-time equivalent local jobs over the next decade. 245. Albuquerque is consistently recognized by Movie Maker magazine as one of the top big cities in North America to live and work as a filmmaker, and the only city to earn no. 1 for consecutive years to 019 to 022. In 2024, it placed second, after Toronto. 248. Country music record labels have a presence in the state, following the former success of Warner Western. 249, 250, 251, 252, 253. During the 1950s to 1960s, Glenn Campbell, The Champs, Johnny Duncan, Carolyn Hester, Al Hurricane, Waylon Jennings, Eddie Reeves, and J.D. Souther recorded on equipment by Norman Petty at Clovis. Norman Petty's recording studio was a part of the rock and roll and rockabilly movement of the 1950s, with the distinctive Route 66 rockabilly stylings of Buddy Holly and the Fireballs. 250 for Albuquerque has been referred to as the Chicano Nashville due to the popularity of regional, Mexican, and Western music artists from the region. 255. A heritage style of country music, called New Mexico music, is widely popular throughout the southwestern U.S. Outlets for these artists include the radio station KANW, Los 15 Grandes de Nuevo Mexico Music Awards, and Al Hurricane Jr. hosts Hurricane Fest to honor his father's music legacy. 256, 257, 258 Technology. New Mexico is part of the larger Rio Grande Technology Corridor, an emerging alternative to Silicon Valley. 259, consisting of clusters of science and technology institutions, stretching from southwestern Colorado to the Gulf of Mexico. 260, Los Alamos was the site of Project Y, the laboratory responsible for designing and developing the world's first atomic bomb for the Manhattan Project. Horticulturist Fabian Garcia developed several new varieties of peppers and other crops at what is now NMSU, which is also a leading space grant college. Robert H. Goddard, credited with ushering the space age, conducted many of his early rocketry tests in Roswell. Astronomer Clyde Tombaugh of Las Cruces discovered Pluto in neighboring Arizona. Personal computer company MITS, which was founded in Albuquerque in 1969, brought about the microcomputer revolution with the development of the first commercially successful microcomputer, the Altair 8800. Two of its employees, Paul Allen and Bill Gates, later founded Microsoft in the city in 1975. 266, 267, 268 multinational technology company Intel, which has had operations in Rio Rancho since 1980, opened its Fab 9 factory in the city in January 2024, part of its commitment to invest $3.5 billion in expanding its operations in the state. It is the company's first high-volume semiconductor operation and the only U.S. factory producing the world's most advanced packaging solutions at scale. 269. The New Mexican government has aimed to develop the state into a major center for technology startups, namely through financial incentives and public-private partnerships. 265. The bioscience sector has experienced particularly robust growth, beginning with the 2013 opening of a bioscience center in Albuquerque, the state's first private incubator for biotechnology startups. New Mexicans have since founded roughly 150 bioscience companies, which have received more patents than any other sector. 215. In 2017, New Mexico established the Bioscience Authority to foster local industry development. The following year, pharmaceutical company Curia built two large facilities in Albuquerque, and in 2022 announced plans to invest $100 million to expand local operations. 215. The state is also positioning itself to play a leading role in developing quantum computing, quantum dot, and clean energy technologies. 270-271. New Mexico's high altitude, generally clear skies, and sparse population have long fostered astronomical and aerospace activities, beginning with the ancient observatories of the Chaco Canyon culture. The space triangle between Roswell, Alamogordo, and Las Cruces has seen the highest concentration rocket tests and launches. 272. New Mexico is sometimes considered the birthplace of the U.S. space program, beginning with Goddard's design of the first liquid fuel rocket in Roswell in the 1930s. 273. The first rocket to reach space flew from White Sands Missile Range in 1948, and both NASA and the Department of Defense continue to develop and test rockets there and at the adjacent Holloman Air Force Base. 272. New Mexico has also become a major center for private spaceflight, hosting the world's first purpose-built commercial spaceport, Spaceport America, which anchors several major aerospace companies and associated contractors, most notably Branson's Virgin Galactic. 274. In November 2022, the New Mexico State Investment Council, which manages that state's $38 billion sovereign wealth fund, announced it would commit $100 million towards America's Frontier Fund AFF, a new venture capital firm that will focus on advanced technologies such as microelectronics and semiconductors, advanced manufacturing, artificial intelligence, new energy sources, synthetic biology, and quantum sciences. 275. Agriculture and food production. Although much of its land is arid, New Mexico has hosted a variety of agricultural activities for at least 2,500 years, centered mostly on the Rio Grande and its tributaries. This is helped by its long history of acequias, along with other farming and ranching methods within New Mexico. Agriculture contributes $40 billion to New Mexico's economy and employs nearly 260,000 people. As of 2023, the state exports $275 million in agricultural goods and ranks first nationwide in the production of chili peppers, second in pecans, and fifth in onions. 276. The state vegetables are New Mexico chili peppers and pinto beans, with the former being the most famous and valuable crop. New Mexico is one of the few states commercially producing pistachios, and its pip-on-harvest pine nut is a protected commodity. 278, 279, 280, 281 dairy is the state's largest commodity, with sales of milk alone totaling $1.3 billion. 277 Dean Foods owns the Creamland brand in New Mexico. The brand was originally founded in 1937 to expand a cooperative dairy venture known as the Albuquerque Dairy Association. 280 to Southwest Cheese Company in Clovis is among the largest cheese production facilities in the United States. 280 for Caballero history among the indigenous and Hispano communities in New Mexico have resulted in large-scale ranch lands throughout the state, most of which are within historically Apache, Navajo, Pueblo, and Spanish land grants. 285 wild game and fish found in the state include Rio Grande cutthroat trout, rainbow trout, crawdads, and venison. Restaurant chains originating in the state include Blake's Loaderburger, Boba Tea Company, Diane's Pizza, Little Anita's, Mac's Steak in the Rough, and Twister's. Many specialize in New Mexican cuisine. Some companies like Alsop's gas stations have consumer foods, like chimichangas. 286. Tourism. New Mexico's distinctive culture, rich artistic scene, favorable climate, and diverse geography have long been major drivers of tourism. As early as 1880, the state was a major destination for travelers suffering from respiratory illnesses, particularly tuberculosis, with its altitude and aridity believed to be beneficial to the lungs. 287. Since the mid-aughts, New Mexico has seen a steady rise in annual visitors, welcoming a record-breaking 39.2 million tourists in 2021. 224. New Mexico's unique culinary scene has garnered increasing national attention, including numerous James Beard Foundation awards. 288. Outdoor recreation in the area is fueled by a variety of internationally recognized nature reserves, public parks, ski resorts, hiking trails, and hunting and fishing areas. New Mexico's government is actively involved in promoting tourism, launching the nation's first state publication, New Mexico Magazine, in 1923. 289. The New Mexico Tourism Department administers the magazine and is also responsible for the New Mexico True campaign. Government in F-2 Raptor flown by the 49th Fighter Wing at Holloman Aft. Federal government spending is a major driver of the New Mexico economy. The state governor's office estimated that the federal government spends roughly $7.8 billion annually in services such as healthcare, infrastructure development, and public welfare. 120 to federal employees make up 3.4% of New Mexico's labor force. 237. Many federal jobs in the state relate to the military. The state hosts 3 Air Force bases: Kirtland Air Force Base, Holloman Air Force Base, and Cannon Air Force Base, a testing range, White Sands Missile Range, and an Army Proving Ground Fort Bliss's McGregor Range. The former alone accounts for 24,000 direct and indirect jobs and over $3 billion in annual federal investment as of 2019. 293 economic incentives. New Mexico provides a number of economic incentives to businesses operating in the state, including various types of tax credits and tax exemptions. Most incentives are based on job creation. State and local governments are permitted to provide land, buildings, and infrastructure to businesses that will generate employment. 294. The 49th Wing is a remotely piloted vehicle wing of the United States Air Force. It is assigned to 19th Air Force, Air Education and Training Command. It is stationed at Holloman Air Force Base, New Mexico. The wing has fought during the Korean War, Vietnam War, Operation Desert Storm, and NATO-led Operation Allied Force over Kosovo. 3. The wing provides combat-ready airmen training MQ-9 Reaper pilots and sensor operators. It deploys combat-ready and mission support forces supporting Air Expeditionary Force operations, peacetime contingencies, provides host base support to over 4,600 personnel, including hosting the 54th Fighter Group's F-16 Fighting Falcon pilot training mission, the 96th Test Group's high-speed test track mission, and the German Air Force Flying Training Unit. Kirtland Air Force Base IATA, ABQ, ICAO, KABQ is a United States Air Force base. It is located in the southeast quadrant of the Albuquerque, New Mexico, urban area, adjacent to the Albuquerque International Sunport. The base was named for the early Army aviator Col. Roy C. Kirtland. 2. The military and the international airport share the same runways, making ABQ a joint civil-military airport. Kirtland AFB is the largest installation in Air Force Global Strike Command and 6th largest in the United States Air Force. The base occupies 51,558 acres and employs over 23,000 people, including more than 4,200 active duty and 1,000 guard, plus 3,200 part-time reserve. In 2000, Kirtland AFB's economic impact on the city of Albuquerque was over $2.7 billion. Citation needed. Kirtland is the home of the Air Force Materiel Command's Nuclear Weapons Center, NWC. The NWC's responsibilities include acquisition, modernization, and sustainment of nuclear system programs for both the Department of Defense and Department of Energy. The NWC is composed of 2 wings, the 377th Air Base Wing and 498th Nuclear Systems Wing, along with 10 groups, and Kirtland is home to the 58th Special Operations Wing 58 SOW, an Air Education and Training Command AETC unit that provides formal aircraft type, model, series training. The 58th SO operates the HC-130J, MC-130J, UH-1N Huey, HH-60G Pavehawk, and CV-20 Osprey aircraft. Headquarters, Air Force Operational Test and Evaluation Center, is also located at Kirtland AFB. Additionally, the 150th Special Operations Wing of the New Mexico Air National Guard, an Air Combat Command ACC gained unit, is also garrisoned at Kirtland. For his story, Roy Kirtland at Wright. Flying a Wright 1911 Model B Flyer, Kirtland Air Force Base was named for Colonel Roy C. Kirtland, 1874 to 1941. In February 1942, Colonel Kirtland learned to fly in 1911 in one of the first Wright airplanes at Dayton, Ohio. During World War I, he organized and commanded a regiment of mechanics and served as an inspector of aviation facilities. Recalled from retirement in 1941 at age 65, he was oldest military pilot in the Air Corps. Colonel Kirtland died of a heart attack on the 2nd of May 1941 at Moffett Field, California. Citation needed. Kirtland Air Force Base has dramatically changed since its establishment as a U.S. Army airfield in 1941. It has evolved from a hastily constructed training and testing facility necessitated by World War II to a significant USAF center for R&D. What began as a 2,000-acre airbase has grown into a 51,800-plus acre facility. Oregon's Kirtland Air Force Base's beginnings stem from 3 private airfields of 1928 to 1939 and are similar to that of other installations choosing to adapt existing runways and hangars for military use. 5-6 in 1928. To Santa Fe Railroad employees working with the town of Albuquerque, graded to runways on East Mesa, with one approximately 5,300 feet long and the other just under 4,000 feet. Albuquerque Airport was wholly a private venture, irrespective of the town's involvement. Immediately following construction of the airport, other individuals and promoters became interested in Albuquerque as a crossroads location for Southwestern air traffic. James G. Oxnard, a New York entrepreneur, bought Franklin's interest in Albuquerque Airport, expanding the facility toward the end of 1928. The airfield soon drew business from private flyers, as well as Transcontinental Air Transport TAT and Western Air Express WAE, commercial airlines that set up operations at the new airport. The city's viability as a crossroad of air traffic in the Southwest was confirmed by this early success. As the 1920s closed, the two airlines initiated competitive passenger, mail, and cargo service between the Midwest and California, which positioned Albuquerque as an important transcontinental airfield. Five-Way soon moved to the West Mesa Airport and was joined by TAT as the two airlines merged to become Trans World Airlines, TWA. This new facility, also private, became known as Albuquerque Airport, and the first, which was renamed Oxnard Field, also continued to service general aviation needs. In the mid-1930s, Mayor Tingley, other city officials, and TWA management began to conceive of a municipal airport, the next necessary step in confirming Albuquerque's status as a crossroads of the Southwest. With the help of President Roosevelt's Works Progress Administration (WPA) funds, construction on a new airport was begun for miles west of Oxnard Field and completed in 1939. On the cusp of World War II, in January 1939, Major General Henry Hap Arnold, who became chief of the U.S. Army Air Corps AAC, proposed to Congress that money be spent on a strong air defense. It soon became a national priority to secure airfields and bombing and gunnery ranges. An effort was also being made in cooperation with the WPA and Civil Aeronautics Authority to build up civilian airports of value to national defense efforts. TAG 1998. Albuquerque city leaders began to examine the possibility of an airbase locating on the mesa, and through extensive negotiations with the AAC, succeeded in their efforts when the Army established an airbase on the East Mesa in 1939. 5. Wealth and poverty. New Mexico is one of the poorest states in the U.S. and has long struggled with poverty. 308. Its poverty rate of roughly 18% is among the highest in the country, exceeded only by Louisiana and Mississippi. In 2017, nearly 30% of New Mexico's children were in poverty, which is 40% higher than the national average. 129. The majority of births, 54%, were financed by Medicaid, a federal health care program for the poor, the third highest of any state. 309. As of May 2021, around 44% of residents were enrolled in Medicaid. New Mexico ranks 39th in the share of households with more than $1 million in wealth, 5%, and among 14 states without a Fortune 500 company. 310. The state has a relatively high level of income disparity, with a Gini coefficient of 0.4769, albeit below the national average of 0.486. Household income is slightly less than $47,000, which is the fourth lowest in the U.S. The unemployment rate for June 2021 is 7.9%, tied with Connecticut as the highest in the country, and close to the peak of 8.0% for June-October 2010, following the 2007-2008 financial crisis. 311. The New Mexico government has enacted several policies to address chronic poverty, including approving a minimum wage increase in January 2021 and requiring paid sick leave. 308. The state's minimum wage of $10.50 is higher than that of the federal government and $30 for other states. 312. It is set to increase to $11.50 on January 1, 2022, and $12 on January 1, 2023. 313. Additionally, counties and municipalities have set their own minimum wages, Santa Fe County enacted a living wage ordinance on March 1, 2021, mandating $12.32. 314. The New Mexico legislature is considering implementing a statewide guaranteed basic income program targeting poorer residents. If enacted, it would be only the second U.S. state after California with such a policy. 315. In August 2021, Santa Fe announced a one-year pilot program that would provide a stability stipend of $400 monthly to 100 parents under the age of 30 who attend Santa Fe Community College. 316. The results of the program will determine whether the state government follows suit with its own basic income proposals. 317. 308. Las Cruces, the state's second-largest city, is officially discussing the enactment of a similar program. 3. Transportation. This photo, the Mexico-United States border divides Sunland Park and the Mexican state of Chihuahua. New Mexico has long been an important corridor for trade and migration. The builders of the ruins at Chaco Canyon also created a radiating network of roads from the mysterious settlement. 318. Chaco Canyon's trade function shifted to Casas Grandes in the present-day Mexican state of Chihuahua. However, north-south trade continued. The pre-Columbian trade with Mesoamerican cultures included northbound exotic birds, seashells, and copper. Turquoise, pottery, and salt were some of the goods transported south along the Rio Grande. Present-day New Mexico's pre-Columbian trade is especially remarkable for being undertaken on foot. The north-south trade route later became a path for horse-drawn colonists arriving from New Spain, as well as trade and communication, later called El Camino Real de Tierra Adentro. It was among the four royal roads that were crucial lifelines to Spanish colonial possessions in North America. 319. Santa Fe Trail. Santa Fe Trail was the 19th century territory's vital commercial and military highway link to the eastern United States. 320. Several trails that terminated in northern New Mexico, including the Camino Real, the Santa Fe Trail, and the Old Spanish Trail, are recognized as National Historic Trails. New Mexico's latitude and low passes made it an attractive east-west transportation corridor. 321. As a territory, the Gadsden Purchase increased New Mexico's land area for the purpose of constructing a southern transcontinental railroad, that of the Southern Pacific Railroad. Another transcontinental railroad was completed by the Atchison, Topeka, and Santa Fe Railway. The railroads essentially replaced the earlier trails, but prompted a population boom. Early transcontinental auto trails later crossed the state, bringing more migrants. Railroads were later supplemented or replaced by a system of highways and airports. Today, New Mexico's interstate highways approximate the earlier land routes of the Camino Real, the Santa Fe Trail, and the transcontinental railroads. Road. See also, speed limits in the United States by jurisdiction section. New Mexico, and list of New Mexico highways. Automobiles remain the primary means of transportation for most New Mexicans, especially in rural areas. 115. The state had 59,927 route miles of highway as of 2000, of which 7,037 received federal aid. 322. In that same year, there were 1,003 miles, 1,614 kilometers of freeways, of which 1,000 were the route miles of interstate highways 10, 25, and 40. 323. The former number has increased with the upgrading of roads near Pojoc, Santa Fe, and Las Cruces to freeways. Notable bridges include the Rio Grande Gorge Bridge near Taos. Larger cities in New Mexico typically have some form of public transportation by road. ABQ Ride is the largest such system in the state. 320. For rural and intercity public transportation by road is provided by Americanos USA, LLC, Greyhound Lines, and several government operators. New Mexico is plagued by poor road conditions, with roughly a third of its roadways suffering from inadequate state and local funding. 325. As of 2001, 703 highway bridges, or 1%, were declared structurally deficient or structurally obsolete. 326. Data from 2019 found 207 bridges and more than 3,822 miles of highway in less than subpar condition, resulting in greater commute times and higher costs in vehicles maintenance. 327. New Mexico has historically had a problem with drunk driving, though this has lessened. According to the Los Angeles Times, the state once had the nation's highest alcohol-related crash rates, but ranked 25th in this regard by July 2009. 328. The highway traffic fatality rate was 1.9 per million miles traveled in 2000, the 13th highest rate among U.S. states. 329. A 2022 report cited poor road as a major factor in New Mexico's continually high traffic fatalities. Between 2015 and 2019, close 1,900 people were killed in automotive crashes in the state. 325. Highways list of U.S. routes in New Mexico. New Mexico has only 3 interstate highways. Interstate 10 travels southwest from the Arizona state line near Lordsburg to the area between Las Cruces and Anthony, near El Paso. Texas Interstate 25 is a major north-south interstate highway starting from Las Cruces to the Colorado state line near Raton, and Interstate 40 is a major east-west interstate highway starting from the Arizona state line west of Gallup to the Texas state line east from Tucumcari. In Albuquerque, 1 to 25 and 1 to 40 meet at a stack interchange called the Big I. The state is tied with Delaware, North Dakota, Puerto Rico, and Rhode Island in having the fewest primary interstate routes, which is partly a reflection of its rugged geography and sparse population. 330. New Mexico currently has 15 United States highways, which account for over 2,980 miles for 1,800 kilometers of its highway system. All but 7 of its 33 counties are served by U.S. routes, with most of the remainder connected by interstate highways. Most routes were built in 1926 by the state government and are still managed and maintained by state or local authorities. The longest is US 70, which spans over 448 miles, 721 kilometers, across southern New Mexico, making up roughly 15% of the state's total U.S. highway length. The shortest is US 160, which runs just 0.86 miles, 1.38 kilometers, across the northwestern corner of the state, between the Arizona and Colorado borders. The most famous route in New Mexico, if not the United States, was US 66, colloquially known as the nation's mother road for its scenic beauty and importance to migrants fleeing west from the Dust Bowl of the 1930s. 331. The road crossed through northern New Mexico, connecting the cities of Albuquerque and Gallup, before being replaced by I-40 in 1985. Much of US 66 remains in use for tourism and has been preserved for historical significance. 332. Another famous route was US 666, which ran south to north along the western portion of the state, serving the Four Corners area. It was known as the Devil's Highway due to the number 666, denoting the number of the beast in Christianity. This numerical designation, as well as its high fatality rate, was subject to controversy, superstition, and numerous cultural references. US 666 was subsequently renamed US Route 491 in 2003. Many existing and former highways in New Mexico are recognized for their aesthetic, cultural, or historical significance, particularly for tourism purposes. 333. The state hosts 10 out of 180 for America's byways, which are federally designated for preservation due to their scenic beauty or national importance. 334. Aerospace also. List of airports in New Mexico. New Mexico has for primary commercial airports that are served by most major domestic and international airliners. Albuquerque International Sunport is the state's main aerial port of entry and by far the largest airport. It is the only one designated a medium-sized hub by the Federal Aviation Administration, serving millions of passengers annually. Spaceport America Terminal, the gateway. Only other comparatively large airports are Lee County Regional Airport, Roswell International Air Center, and Santa Fe Regional Airport, which have varying degrees of service by major airlines. Most airports in New Mexico are small, general aviation hubs operated by municipal and county governments and usually served solely by local and regional commuter airlines. Due to its sparse population and many isolated, rural communities, New Mexico ranks among the states most reliant on essential air service, a federal program that maintains a minimal level of scheduled air service to communities that are otherwise unprofitable for commercial airlines. Spaceport America New Mexico hosts the world's first operational and purpose-built commercial spaceport, Spaceport America, located in Upham, near Truth or Consequences, 351, 352, 353. It is operated by the state-backed New Mexico Spaceport Authority and NSA. Rocket launches began in April 2007, 353, with the spaceport officially opening in 2011. 354. Tenants include Hapsmobile, Up Aerospace, Spin Launch, and Virgin Galactic. 355 over 300 suborbital flights have been successfully launched from Spaceport America since 2006, with the most notable being Virgin Galactic's VSS Unity on May 22, 2021, which made New Mexico the third U.S. state to launch humans into space, after California and Florida. 356, 357 on October 22, 2021. Spaceport America was the site of the first successfully tested vacuum-sealed suborbital accelerator, which aims to offer a significantly more economical alternative to launching satellites via rockets. 358, conducted by Spaceport 10 and Spin Launch. The test is the first of roughly 30 demonstrations being planned. 358. Local government in New Mexico consists primarily of counties and municipalities. There are 33 counties, of which the most populous is Bernalillo, which contains the state's largest city, Albuquerque. Counties are usually governed by an elected 5-member county commission, sheriff, assessor, clerk, and treasurer. A municipality may call itself a village, town, or city. 388, with no distinction in law and no correlation to any particular form of government. Municipal elections are nonpartisan. 389. In addition, limited local authority can be vested in special districts and landowners associations. Law New Mexico is one of 23 states without the death penalty. 390, becoming the 15th state to abolish capital punishment in 2009. 391, the state has among the most permissive firearms laws in the country. 393, its constitution explicitly enshrines the right to bear arms and prevents local governments from regulating gun ownership. 394, residents may purchase any firearm deemed legal under federal law without a permit. 393, there is a 7-day waiting period under state law for picking up a firearm after it has been purchased. Holders of concealed handgun licenses are exempt from the 7-day waiting period, nor any restrictions on magazine capacity. Additionally, New Mexico is a shall-issue state for concealed carry permits, thus giving applicants a presumptive right to receive a license without giving a compelling reason. 395 before December 2013, New Mexico law was silent on the issue of same-sex marriage. The issuance of marriage licenses to same-sex couples was determined at the county level, with some county clerks issuing marriage licenses to same-sex couples and others not. In December 2013, the New Mexico Supreme Court issued a unanimous ruling directing all county clerks to issue marriage licenses to same-sex couples, thereby making New Mexico the 17th state to recognize same-sex marriage statewide. Based on 2008 data, New Mexico had 146 law enforcement agencies across the state, county, and municipal levels. 396 state law enforcement is statutorily administered by the Department of Public Safety. DPS 397 The New Mexico State Police is a division of the DPS with jurisdiction over all crimes in the state. 398, 399. As of 2008, New Mexico had over 5,000 sworn police officers, a ratio of 252 per 100,000 residents, which is roughly the same as the nation. 396. In 2019, it was the first U.S. state to decriminalize possession of drug paraphernalia. 405. As of June 2022, New Mexico has one of the nation's most permissive abortion laws. Elective abortion care is legal at all stages of pregnancy, without restrictions such as long waiting periods and mandated parental consent. 406. In 2021, the state repealed a 1969 trigger law that had banned most abortion procedures, which would have come into effect following the U.S. Supreme Court's ruling in Dobbs v. Jackson Women's Health Organization. 407. In response to the Dobbs decision, which held that abortion was not a constitutional right, New Mexico's governor issued an executive order protecting abortion providers from out-of-state litigation. In anticipation of the influx of non-residents seeking abortions. 407. 408. Education. New Mexico Public Education Department is in Santa Fe. Due to its relatively low population and numerous federally funded research facilities, New Mexico had the highest concentration of PhD holders of any state in 2000. 411. Los Alamos County, which hosts the eponymous National Laboratory, leads the state in the most post-secondary degree holders at 38.7% of residents, or 4,899 of 17,950. 412. However, New Mexico routinely ranks near the bottom in studies measuring the quality of primary and secondary school education. 413. By national standards, New Mexico has one of the highest concentrations of persons who did not finish high school or have some college education, albeit by a low margin. Slightly more than 14% of residents did not have a high school diploma, compared to the national rate of 11.4%, the fifth lowest out of 52 U.S. states and territories. Almost a quarter of people over 25, 23.9%, did not complete college. 123, compared with 21% nationally. 414. New Mexico ranks among the bottom 10 states in the proportion of residents with a bachelor's degree or higher, 27.7%, but 21st in PhD earners, 12.2%. The national average is 33.1% and 12.8%. In 2020, the number of doctorate recipients was 300, placing the state 34th in the nation. 415. In 2018, a state judge issued a landmark ruling that New Mexico is violating the constitutional rights of at-risk students by failing to provide them with sufficient education, in particularly those with indigenous, non-English speaking, and low-income backgrounds. 416. The court ordered the governor and legislature to provide an adequate system by April 2019. 417. In response, New Mexico increased teacher salaries, funded an extended school year, expanded pre-kindergarten childhood education programs, and developed a budget formula for delivering more funding to schools that serve at-risk and low-income students. 418. Nevertheless, many activists and public officials contend that these efforts continue to fall short, particularly with respect to Native American schools and students. 418. New Mexican culture is a unique fusion of indigenous, Spanish, Hispanic, and American influences. The intermingling of these diverse groups is reflected in New Mexico's demographics, toponyms, cuisine, dialect, and identity. Compared to other Western states, New Mexico's Spanish and Mexican heritage remain more visible and enduring due to it having been the oldest, most populous, and most important province in New Spain's northern periphery. 434. However, some historians allege that this history has been understated or marginalized by persistent American biases and misconceptions towards Spanish colonial history. reflected in part by the fact that many Americans do not know it is part of the U.S. For 135, this misconception variably elicits frustration, amusement, or even pride among New Mexicans as evidence of their unique heritage. 436, 437, 438, like other states in the American Southwest, New Mexico bears the legacy of the Old West period of American westward expansion, characterized by cattle ranching, cowboys, pioneers, the Santa Fe Trail, and conflicts among and between settlers and Native Americans. 142. The state's vast and diverse geography, sparse population, and abundance of ghost towns have contributed to its enduring frontier image and atmosphere. 142. Many fictional works of the Western genre are set or produced in New Mexico. The earliest New Mexico artists whose work survives today are the Mimbres Indians, whose black and white pottery could be mistaken for modern art, except for the fact that it was produced before 1130 CE. Many examples of this work can be seen at the Deming Luna Mimbres Museum for 145 and at the Western New Mexico University Museum. For 146, Santa Fe has long hosted a thriving artistic community, which has included such prominent figures as Bruce Nauman, Richard Tuttle, John Connell, Stein of Osulka, and Ned Bittinger. For 147, the capital city has several art museums, including the New Mexico Museum of Art, Museum of Spanish Colonial Art, Museum of International Folk Art, Museum of Indian Arts and Culture, Museum of Contemporary Native Arts, Site Santa Fe, and others. Colonies for artists and writers thrive, and the small city teems with art galleries. In August, the city hosts the annual Santa Fe Indian Market, which is the oldest and largest juried Native American art showcase in the world. Performing arts include the Santa Fe Opera, which presents 5 operas in repertory each July to August, the Santa Fe Chamber Music Festival, held each summer, and the restored Lensic Theater, a principal venue for many kinds of performances. The weekend after Labor Day boasts the burning of Zozobra, a 50-foot 15 meters marionette, during Fiestas de Santa Fe. Interior of the Crosby Theater at the Santa Fe Opera, viewed from the mezzanine. As New Mexico's largest city, Albuquerque hosts many of the state's leading cultural events and institutions, including the New Mexico Museum of Natural History and Science, the National Hispanic Cultural Center, the National Museum of Nuclear Science and History, and the famed annual Albuquerque International Balloon Fiesta. The National Hispanic Cultural Center has held hundreds of performing arts events, art showcases, and other events related to Spanish culture in New Mexico and worldwide in the Centerpiece Roy E. Disney Center for the Performing Arts or in other venues at the 53-acre facility. New Mexico residents and visitors alike can enjoy performing art from around the world at Pope Joy Hall on the campus of the University of New Mexico. Pope Joy Hall hosts singers, dancers, Broadway shows, other types of acts, and Shakespeare. 448, Albuquerque also has the unique and iconic Como Theater, built in 1927 in the Pueblo Revival style archetype. Sure, the Como presents live theater and concerts, as well as movies and simulcast operas. 449. In addition to other general interest theaters, Albuquerque also has the African American Performing Arts Center and Exhibit Hall, which showcases achievements by people of African descent. 450, and the Indian Pueblo Cultural Center, which highlights the cultural heritage of the First Nations people of New Mexico. 451 luminarias in the Old Mission Church. Gemes State Monument. New Mexico holds strong to its Spanish heritage. Old Spanish traditions such as zarzuelas and flamenco are popular. 452, 453, the University of New Mexico is the only institute of higher education in the world with a program dedicated to flamenco. 454, flamenco dancer and native New Mexican Maria Benitez founded the Maria Benitez Institute for Spanish Arts to present programs of the highest quality of the rich artistic heritage of Spain, as expressed through music, dance, visual arts, and other art forms. There is also the annual Festival Flamenco Internacional de Albuquerque, where native Spanish and New Mexican flamenco dancers perform at the University of New Mexico. It is the largest and oldest flamenco event outside of Spain. 455 in the mid-20th century. There was a thriving Hispano school of literature and scholarship being produced in both English and Spanish. Among the more notable authors were Angelico Chavez, Nina Otero Warren, Fabiola Cabeza de Baca, Aurelio Espinosa, Cleophas Jaramillo, Juan Bautista Rail, and Aurora Lucero Whiteley. As well, writer D.H. Lawrence lived near Taos in the 1920s at the D.H. Lawrence Ranch, where there is a shrine said to contain his ashes. New Mexico's strong Spanish, Anglo, and Wild West frontier motifs have contributed to a unique body of literature, represented by internationally recognized authors such as Rudolfo Anaya, Tony Hillerman, and Daniel Abraham. 456. Western fiction folk heroes Billy the Kid, El Fuego Baca, Geronimo, and Pat Garrett originate in New Mexico. 457. Owing to a combination of financial incentives, low cost, and geographic diversity, New Mexico has long been a popular setting or filming location for various films and television series. In addition to Wild Hogs, other movies filmed in New Mexico include Sunshine Cleaning and Vampires. Various seasons of the A&E Netflix series Longmire were filmed in several New Mexico locations, including Las Vegas, Santa Fe, Eagle Nest, and Red River. 472. The widely acclaimed Breaking Bad franchise was set and filmed in and around Albuquerque, a product of the ongoing success of media in the city, in large part helped by Albuquerque studios and the presence of production studios like Netflix and Universal. 473. 474. 82. Sports Santa Ana Star Centerno Major League professional sports teams are based in New Mexico, but the Albuquerque Isotopes are the Pacific Coast League baseball affiliate of the MLB Colorado Rock. Eyes. The state hosts several baseball teams of the Pecos League: the Roswell Invaders, Ruidoso Osos, Santa Fe Fugo, and the White Sands Pupfish. The Duke City Gladiators of the Indoor Football League IFL plays their home games at Tingley Coliseum in Albuquerque. The city also hosts two soccer teams: New Mexico United, which began playing in the second-tier USL Championship in 2019, and the Associated New Mexico United U23, which plays in the fourth-tier USL League 2. Collegiate athletics are the center of spectator sports in New Mexico, namely the rivalry between various teams of the University of New Mexico Lobos and the New Mexico State Aggies. 493. The intense competition between the two teams is often referred to as the Rio Grande rivalry or the Battle of I-25, in reference to both campuses being located along that highway. NMSU also has a rivalry with the University of Texas at El Paso called the Battle of I-10. The winner of the NMSU-UTEP football game receives the Silver Spade Trophy. Olympic gold medalist Tom Jager, an advocate of controversial high-altitude training for swimming, has conducted training camps in Albuquerque at 5,312 feet, 1,619 meters, and Los Alamos at 7,320 feet to 231 meters. 490 for New Mexico is a major hub for various shooting sports, mainly concentrated in the NRA Whittington Center in Raton, which is largest and most comprehensive competitive shooting range and training facility in the U.S. 495 historic heritage owing to its millennia of habitation and over to centuries of Spanish colonial rule. New Mexico features a significant number of sites with historical and cultural significance. 46 locations across the state are listed by the U.S. National Register of Historic Places, the 18th highest of any state. 496. New Mexico has 9 of the country's 84 national monuments, which are sites federally protected by presidential proclamation. This is the second highest number after Arizona. 104. The monuments include some of the earliest to have been created: El Morro and Gila Cliff dwellings, proclaimed in 1906 and 1907, respectively. Both preserve the state's ancient indigenous heritage. 100 for New Mexico is one of 20 states with a UNESCO World Heritage Site, and among only 8 with more than one. Excluding sites shared between states, New Mexico has the most World Heritage Sites in the country, with 3 exclusively within its territory: 497, 498, 499.